Hey everyone, so today I'll be going through the Mathematics P4 SA2 Catholic High paper with you. So, hope all of you are doing fine, and the purpose of this session today is not really to give you the answers. So, as a rule of thumb, I won't be going through every single question in a deep fashion. Instead, the purpose of this session is to give you advice, tips, and tricks, and all of these surround the idea of answering the questions in a very time efficient as well as accurate manner. So I'm going to give you a lot of advice on each of the different sections, and if you remember correctly, there are three sections that this math paper is split into: the MCQ section, as well as section B, which is the short answer questions, and then section C, which are your long answer questions. So those are your generally 4 and 5 mark questions. So I'll be going through section by section, where I'll first give you some generic tips, and then I will go through the relevant section in the paper, where I will specifically choose to answer certain questions in greater depth, but generally highlight to you all the different parts of the different questions, and then we will cover the paper as much as we can. I would also not like to make this session too long because I think it should be short and concise for you. So I should identify the main parts of the questions which I think are most relevant to you so that it is most beneficial for you. So firstly, we'll be looking at section 1, which is your MCQ. And the MCQ section, with all due honesty, is the main section in which you should be scoring full marks. Like, try your best in every paper, like every practice paper, and eventually your SA2 as well as your future papers in primary school. MCQ is one of the few sections which tend to be very guided because you have a lot of answers and options given to you. So there is a lot of avenue for you to answer the questions correctly, because the answers will also give you a rough estimate on what you should probably be getting. So the generic tips that I would say would firstly be to identify the main keywords that are held in the specific question. So for example, if we can identify words such as factors, multiples, mass, and volume, these are all important keywords that relate back to a specific topic within your syllabus. And these will then eventually give you a good idea or a thought process that you should be adopting. And I will go through examples for these tips that I'm giving over here. The second tip that I would generally give a lot of students would be to recognize important portions of the questions as you read. And this is especially important so that you can avoid careless mistakes. As much as MCQ is a section where a lot of people tend to do well because a lot of the questions tend to be basic and rather guided because of the options being given, there is also a lot of avenue to make careless mistakes because you do not have to present your working or anything. So people tend to neglect a lot of the important portions in the question. So simple things like not a factor, people may assume the question is asking for a factor, but it's asking for the answer that is not a factor. So all of these are important portions of the questions that you should specifically take note of so that you can avoid careless mistakes. The ideal way to complete the MCQ section will definitely be to solve all the questions, and this is the most ideal, but you should realize that you may not necessarily have to do that for every single question because of the other option that we have, and that is elimination. Ideally, for any math paper, our main aim or focus is going to be to solve the question, just so we can make sure that our answers are accurate and correct. And in the event that we are not able to solve the question, one should realize that you should not spend too much of time on it during the math paper, but instead move through elimination and find the best possible answer and then move ahead with it. So I will now employ these techniques to show you how you can answer the questions. So I'll be using some basic annotations as well as some previous annotations I've already done on the questions to help you answer and to show you how you can adopt these skills in answering the questions. So firstly, the first question is, what is the missing number? And this is a very basic question. The main focus that I wanted to tell you within this question was that is a very straightforward question, so ideally you should be able to solve it. So 3 10,000s is just 30,000, 5,000 and 8, and you add them up and you get option 4, which is 35,008. But my main focus on this specific question is not really to solve it, but I just want to say that in the event that you do not have time, and this is one of the last few questions of the MCQ and you're really trying to rush it, instead of solving a question like this, where you have 10,000s, thousands and ones, and assuming they are weirder numbers and you're not able to formulate the solution correctly, I think you can work through elimination very easily. Because if you realize, the first portion of the question talks about 10,000s. So 10 times 1,000 is clearly 10,000. So any answer that you get, given that all of these are addition symbols, should definitely be more than 10,000. So ideally, if you work through elimination, option 4 is the only answer where you have a number that is greater than 10,000. So this is a typical example of where you can use elimination to answer your questions. And ideally, you can use this not really for such basic questions, but more of questions where you can't really find the answer and you're struggling, but you can use a lot of simple logic when you do not have much time. Which of the following is a multiple? Like I said before, this is a keyword. Multiple gives you a lot of thought process. It should initiate a specific thought process within your brain, because multiples of 6 and 8 would simply require you to list out. So just simply write down all the different multiples for 6 and 8, and then you find the option that fits into it. For the third question, which of the following numbers when rounded to the nearest hundred becomes 19,800? I've come across a lot of students who face difficulties with such questions because they're often unsure about which number or which digit they should focus on. But typically my advice is whenever you have 100 or nearest tens or nearest 1, focus should be on the number within that specific place. So 100 would mean the focus should be on 8. So any number that you attempt to round off should give you 800 at the back. So it's not, if you attempt to isolate the last 3 digits, 705, if you round it off to the nearest 100, it just gives you 700. So option 1 is out. Same for 2. If you look at 3 and 4, 850 should actually give you 900 when you try and round it off to the nearest 100. So the answer should be 3. Not a factor. This is one of the examples that I gave within the tips and advice. So not a factor of 12 should mean that you are looking for an answer that is not a factor of 12. So ideally this is elimination, because you are finding for something that is not an answer. So you can either choose to list out all the different factors of 12 and see which of these do not lie in it, or you can choose to simply eliminate. Because 1, look for a number as small as 12. I know that 2 is a multiple, 2 is a factor of it, 3 is also a factor, and same for 4. And through that I can understand that 8 should be the correct answer. Moving on to question 5. Whenever you have a fraction question, you should always find the common denominator. One of the main and biggest ideas surrounding fractions would be to find the common denominator, because this will help you to add the 2 fractions up and eventually give you the right answer. So in the case of 3 and 6, you actually realize that 3 is a factor of 6, which means that I can simply convert this fraction into something with a denominator of 6. So 1/3 should simply be 2/6, and I can then add them up to get the answer 3. Moving on to question 6, tenths. I think the emphasis here is on the TH and S at the back. So if you look at it clearly, it's looking at the decimals. It's not looking at your tens place, but is rather looking at your tenths place. So the answer should be 2. Which of these is a missing number in the box? Here, you clearly know that they are asking for the conversion of a mixed fraction into an improper fraction. Typically, whenever I get a mixed fraction, what I'll do is simply to multiply the denominator by the whole number at the front. So the 6 should be multiplied by the 5, and that should give you 30. 30 plus 2 should be 32. Alright, okay, so these are some of the more difficult questions which I feel that we should focus a bit more time on. So firstly, Mary had 17 bags of marbles, and each bag contains 25 marbles. She repacked all of these equally into 5 boxes. And how many marbles were there in each specific box? If you think about it, ideally, let's just solve the question because you have a lot of numbers, so you probably will not get an immediate gauge on what the answer should be, unlike that in the first question. So we're just going to take the time to solve it, which means that you have to multiply 17 by 25 and then eventually divide it into 5 to find out how many there is in each specific box. So eventually you should get the right answer when you manually work it out. But another option would simply be to do elimination, because if you think about it, 17 and 25, they should give you a number that is in the high hundreds or early thousands if you think about it, because 25 times 20, if you think about it, is just 500, right? Here I'm just trying to make an estimation. So 17 is approximately 20. So 20 times 25. The answer that you get should be, if you think about it, if I just give you a second to think about it and find the answer, it should actually just be 500. So ideally, if you're going to split these 500 into 5 boxes, you should get an answer that's roughly 100. So 3 and 4 are definitely out of the question because you have lesser than 20 bags of marbles, and if you have 20 bags, you get 500 marbles, and you divide them further into 5 boxes. So any answer that you get should be below 100. So 3 and 4 are definitely out, and 1 is too small to be in the question as well, so the answer should be 2. So that is once again by elimination. Here I've drawn a very simple model. So if you remember correctly, MCQ just requires you to answer the questions and initiate the answer in the OAS. So there's no requirement for you to present the solution to the examiner. So you do not have to do anything, like any model that is very perfect and precise, unless it helps you to specifically answer the question. So in this case, I've just drawn a model here, but you can just do a simple like scribble or sketch on your paper, just for you to understand how many units and how many just how many units you're getting and how you should divide the total money that they have. So in this case, Abby saved 5 times as much as Ben, so a simple model should just have 5 units, 1 unit, and they saved a total of 4680. So how much did Ben save? In this case, it's clear enough to you that you have like 6 units. So just divide the value by 6 and you should get the answer. Moving on, the price of pens sold in a shop is as follows, and they give you the exact details, which is that 1 pen costs $2.25 and a bundle of 4 pens costs $5.70. So Roger wants to buy 9 pens, and what is the least amount of money that he has to pay? So in this case, if you remember correctly, he has 9 pens, and a bundle of 4 pens clearly is cheaper than if you were to buy it individually. Like if I were to visit the shop 5 times or like 9 times and buy the pen 9 different times, I'm going to pay $2.25 each time. But if I want 9 pens and I simply buy it in a bundle of 4, I'm going to be able to save a lot of money. So this is what they mean by what is the least amount he has to pay. Technically you can just take 9 times $2.25, but that is wrong because they're asking for the least amount of money that he has to pay. So the assumption here is that he prioritizes the buying of the bundle of pens instead of buying everything as a single pen. So this is where you're going to have to do a simple division. 9, and then you have to divide it by 4. And in this case, you'll get a group, a quotient of 2 as well as a remainder of 1. And that should tell you that he has bought 2 bundles of 4 pens which is 8 pence, and then he bought 1 pence separately, and the total is 9 pence. So the least amount of money he has to pay would be the addition of 225 to 2 times the 570, and you should get my answer. But another thing that I wanted to focus in this question was, what if I had bigger numbers? Like in this case, we have 9 pence, and 9 is just a small number. But what if I had amazingly big numbers? So say for example, 35. I'm not gonna be able to sit down and keep adding like 4 plus 4, and then I get 8, and then I guess and check, and then I realize that, oh, there's a remainder of 1. So whenever you have a very big number, the safe and foolproof method is simply to do simple division and find out what the remainder is. So in this case, Jerry bought 6.8 kg of flour and he used 2.95 kg to make some cookies. How much did he have left? A lot of times people don't even read the entire question. They assume what the question is and they don't even realize that they're asking for how much he had left. So you have to always be careful, which is why some people probably take 6.8 and add it to 2.95 instead of subtracting, and they end up getting 4, option 4. But this should be an immediate cancellation because we're talking about how much he had left, and he already used up close to 3 kg of the 6.8 kg he had. So the ideal answer you should be getting should fall within the first 3 answers or options. Moving on, this question requires you to touch back on the basic knowledge that you have. So the perimeter of a square is 36 cm, and you have to find the length of a square. In this case, you should realize that they're looking at specific characteristics. So a square, you should realize that it has 4 equal sides. So in these questions, always remember to identify the specific characteristics you're looking at. Like a rectangle would have different characteristics compared to a square. So you always have to trace back to the origin, and then you have to remember what are the different characteristics you're right on about. In this case, once again you have squares, so if you did not realize that a square has 4 equal sides, it will be very difficult for you to answer the question. So you have to remember some of these basic rules, and they are just mainly the fact that you have 4 equal sides. So in this case, finding the area of rectangle R would be easy because you know that the length of P is 9, so in this case this portion is 9 cm. And then for Q, if you look at this length, like this specific length, it's 9 plus 6, so that's 15. So this length should also be 15. So the length of R itself should be 15 plus 9, and then eventually you have to multiply to get the answer. I think, yeah, so in this case elimination will be slightly difficult because if you do not have the fundamental idea that all your different sides of the square should be equal in length, you may not exactly realize that the answer should be, you know, like a specific range. So you have to make sure that some of these basic characteristics are within the range of what you've studied. So before you enter the exam, run over these very small things and just make sure that they are within your head. So simple things like equal sides for the square, and like the length of a rectangle, like a rectangle has 2 opposite sides that are equal, and all of these could